Train the muscles, not the joints.
Well, welcome back to Natural Land Bodybuilding Mountain. And today I'm going to be training at the gym again here. I'm going to be doing some preachers to start because the bench that I wanted was taken. So once again, this is kind of a chronic problem at the gym, you know what I mean? Like usually the piece of equipment that you want is taken when you show up. So then you're forced to do something else, but sometimes that's a blessing, right? And one of the things I do like doing at the gym is the machine preacher. And different machines are not necessarily created equal. Some of them have a more advantageous torque curve than others on the bicep belly. And I think this just really boils down to your own individual dimensions. So this isn't just necessarily the machine itself, but more about your own personal preference and how you move and where you feel that tension. But the one thing I will say is that even if you're doing a machine preacher, I never would recommend locking out at the bottom or going down too far, right? You want to keep your attention on the muscle, but you also want to keep the arms bent, because when you start to go too extended, the tendon will start to get an exponential amount of stress. And then that's why you see a lot of these TikToks and Instagrams where guys tear biceps and stuff. Because if you notice normal bicep curls just at your side, right, there's a point of diminishing tension as you go down. Like there's not this risk of hyperextending the elbow. So the muscle does not have to protect the elbow in the same way as when you are doing horizontal type plane movement where, you know, the gravity's pulling the arm into an extended position. So just bear that in mind, because I've had lots of people come to me with preacher curl or elbow issues, and sure enough, most of the time or a lot of the time they were overextending on the preacher curl, and that was exacerbating an elbow issue. So yeah, unless you want to wear elbow wraps the rest of your life or deal with a real serious tear, I'd highly recommend not coming all the way down on the preacher. So yeah, let's do a couple sets here. I'm just warming up here, just trying to get to know what weight is the right weight for me. But see, I'm keeping this tension right on the bicep, right? It's not bad. The thing I like about it is that it locks the elbows in place and the shoulders in place. So it's just something totally different than free weight stuff. So sometimes it's a curse, sometimes it's a blessing. Now, I'd rather use a little bit lighter, but I'm playing around with the weight, just trying to figure out the dynamics of this machine, right? So sometimes you got to play around a little bit and find the right tension. Now, normally with preacher curl or an isolation movement where there is stress on the tendons as you extend, right? Even if I'm doing the right range of motion on these movements, I do like to stick to more 15 reps and above. You know, a set of 20 to 30 reps is more than ideal in this type of movement. Usually I'll reserve the heavier type stuff. If I'm going to do heavy stuff for an isolation, which is also rare, I'll do that with movements where I'm not putting my body in a compromised position, right? Like you'll notice even when I'm doing heavy barbell curls, I'll lean over the bar and have the elbows back as I come down, because that takes the stress off the bicep tendon, but it does keep a lot of stress on the muscle belly as I pull that weight up and down, right? So it's all about, like I said, keeping that muscle tension, but at the same time avoiding the risk of injury. And it's sometimes tricky to find that sweet spot, but once you find it, then it'll be easy for you to feel yourself into adapting that technique to different exercises. This is lighter. I just went down 10 pounds lighter, and it's exponentially lighter. So you got to find that kind of right weight, right sweet spot for you, right? Nice. Now I notice also when I'm doing more up here, partials, I feel more break, like the brachii. But when I come down, sometimes I'll start to rotate a little bit and then bring in the brachialis, right? So it, again, depends where you want to concentrate that muscle tension. good. So sometimes what I like about changing up an exercise or using a machine instead is you can do some extra volume and enjoy it, you know, where sometimes if you're doing the same type of exercise all the time, sometimes that extra volume is not so enjoyable, right? But sometimes it's kind of fun to sit on a machine, do 4, 5, 6 sets or something when you normally wouldn't do that, just because you're enjoying the feeling of it. And yeah, sometimes it's just the notoriety of doing something new, but at the same time, I do agree with changing up the volume. You don't always have to do high volume. You don't always have to do low volume, but I do think that changing it up from time to time to see what is the correct volume is a great way to assess what's working for you and what isn't. Okay, good. So now I'm going to move to some bench, and I don't know what weight I'm going to go to today. I'm going to go on feel, so I'll definitely go to 2 plates at least, but maybe a little bit more weight. But once again, depending on the bench that you're on will depend on how it feels. So the bench press at home I find is a little bit harder. For some reason the flat has a different bit of an angle. I know that sounds counterintuitive or whatever. This pad here is not as hard as the one I have at home. This one you sink into a little bit, so it almost gives you a minor bit of a decline, or maybe my bench at home gives me a little bit of an incline, I don't know. But the bottom line is it feels differently on the delts, and so it's always good to adapt to a new piece of equipment using moderate weight before you go into extremely heavy or you start to push yourself in reps of 6, 7 reps and below, right? So yeah, but I like this bench actually. It feels pretty good. I'm enjoying the angle, but I just did some biceps. I'm gonna go into some chests and then we'll go from there. So something some people do is that they'll stretch out right away, but in the end, it's actually better to get some blood flow in there before you start to stretch. So if you're doing warm-up sets, I highly recommend you do some movements that are not so extreme, or at least don't stretch quite so much. Allow the blood get into the muscle first, and then after that blood's there, then you start to stretch a bit. So, and again, you have to still follow the rules of what is the right range of motion for you, but stretching before blood flow is not necessarily a good thing. So one subject I haven't really talked about is the fact that when you don't work out that much, how your risk of injury can go up, just like if you work out too much, right? And I'm talking about the extreme cases here where, say, you just work out once a month or once every 2 months, and then you strain your ass off on the bench or strain your ass off on leg press or squats or whatever. If your body's not primed for the movement, the risk of injury goes up quite a bit. And I've felt this and I've noticed this. So that's why I'd rather have higher frequency type workouts with lower intensity. And then from there, I'm primed to have a good hard workout instead of just resting altogether. I find if I rest too much, that also creates a problem with injuries because the muscles aren't ready for what's to come. The body's not really calibrated to that. And this is something that's never talked about because some people just assume, you know, some of the Mike Menser people too, they assume that if they don't train for long periods of time, that somehow it's going to equate to better results and less injury risk. But I would say it actually correlates to injuries a lot of times too, because your body's so out of tune, right? So whatever is the frequency you need to be in tune is the most important, to make sure everything's feeling right. You know, I'm not talking about chronic inflammation. I'm just talking about making sure that everything feels good and coordinated. And if you find that sweet spot between the frequency and the volume and so forth, you're going to be much more resilient as opposed to somebody that just doesn't train for 2 or 3 months at a time and then goes into the gym and blasts out a really hard workout, right? So it's the same thing with a lot of other sports. You know, if you look at hockey, you know, one of the biggest cause of heart attacks are guys that go to play old timers hockey or just men's league hockey, but they only go really intense once a week and they just skate their ass off and get their heart rate pounding through the roof. And of course they start to have heart attacks. Whereas opposed to, say, they played hockey several times a week, they probably would be more calibrated to that type of intensity, and then it wouldn't be quite so much of a shock to the system. So shocking the system, like in a form of trauma, is not going to help you get more gains or be healthier. If anything, it'll work against you, right? So, you know, this is the kind of gray area you have to traverse to find out what is right. But I would say err on the side of the callous principle, which is exercise, get your body acclimated, and then push. But don't just push without acclimation, right? Sword. Now the other technique that I use a lot of times with certain weight is I not only find strategic range of motion, but I also use a conservative range of motion when I'm doing heavier weight, as far as I don't stretch down as far as I normally could, just because I'm making sure, again, that the body is used to that weight first and foremost, and then from there I can progressively go down lower if that feels like the right thing. Now, because I have a dislocating shoulder issue and a torn rotator cuff over here, hockey injuries, for those of you who don't know about that, but the bottom line is that once I start going down lower than what you're seeing here, I usually start to get way more front delt instead of chest. And for those of you who have intact labrums, that might seem counterintuitive to you because your body will function differently, right? But when I come down with the weight, what'll happen is the shoulder will slide forward and then it hyper stretches the front delt. So that's why I have to use adjusted range of motion in this movement. And that's why I found that if I just touch my chest, all it does is just irritate my shoulders, but it doesn't give me any more chest results. It just irritates the area and risks injury, right? So the fact is that you have to find out what your personal circumstance is and make adjustments accordingly. And then from there, you can get great workouts, right? Rather than just following like sheep, everybody else, and do what they do. Well, they don't have your body, right? So if these people don't have your body, it doesn't make sense to do what they're doing because their body is going to be different than yours. last set of these. Do another set of 275, and then what I'm going to do is play around with some declines, because again, I haven't done that for a long time, so maybe I'll just do some leg declines just to kind of pump it up, you know. And yeah, sometimes the environment elicits the creativity, you know, or brings it out, right? So that's something I found that when I started training at the gym when I was 18 years old, and I had been training at home since I was 14, right? When I went to the gym, because there was a plethora of equipment and a lot of people doing different things, it started to inspire me to try different stuff, and some of the stuff was very good. Like there was this donkey calf machine that we had at this gym called Fitness Unlimited back in the day, and that thing was awesome. I mean, because you're already in a bent over position, really stretching out those hamstrings and the gastrocnemius, so I found that was an awesome movement. And then I also started doing that movement on the leg press, because the leg press machine is a great machine for mimicking that donkey calf movement, because when you stretch the hips down, when you bend over, you naturally stretch the gastrocnemius out a bit. And I find that that naturally helps you take that calf into a deeper level of failure. So yeah, sometimes the equipment itself is important from a place of trying different angles and experimenting and seeing what's appropriate for your body type, right? And sometimes you have to try a lot of things. Like sometimes you'll see that certain movements are just horrible for you and they might be great for somebody else, but only through having a certain variety of stimulation can you find out, right? And unfortunately, if you just have a set of dumbbells and barbells, you don't necessarily have quite the same opportunities, although you can get quite creative with them as well, which you've seen me do at my house, right? So yeah, the thing is that yeah, being creative can be helpful in bodybuilding sometimes. It's not always about just doing the standard foundational movements, right? Nice. Okay. So I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of excited actually about doing a new movement that I haven't done in a while. So yeah, the other thing about doing different angles sometimes, you sometimes, like I've said this before, you sometimes actually heal certain little tweaks or little strains that you didn't realize, you know, like muscle knots and stuff. So for instance, my upper back has been kind of tight lately and I've been trying to click this thing back into place, but doing a decline might actually help. Maybe, who knows, right? Because in a way you're doing a little bit of traction, right? As you're laying upside down with weight in your arms. So sometimes experimenting with these different angles can sometimes put things back into place that have been just a little bit off or out of alignment. So that's why it's, again, another reason to do new angles, right? And of course I have, oh yeah, and of course I don't have to tell you guys this, but I'm gonna say it anyway. When you're doing declines, remember, never go super heavy. Always work with a spotter. Unless, of course, you're absolutely sure you're not going to be hitting failure and using moderately light weights like I'm going to be doing today. But if you're, you know, using heavy weights and you don't have a spotter on a decline, it's a death sentence, right? So don't be doing this alone in the gym at night with heavy weight or even lightweight in some cases if you're not really sure where your limits are. So yeah, I know where my limits are, so that's why I can do this. But don't you do it if you don't. This feels weird. Okay, so I already know I'm gonna have to do lower pins maybe. So this feels like I'm upside down. It's so weird. I haven't done this in a long time. Wow, that was kind of neat. That was easy. Now notice on this bar I have the clips on, okay? So, you know, with lightweight warm-up, sometimes I'll, you know, forego the clips and then maybe you'll see the plate kind of move out a little bit, but I'm not too worried with lightweight. But when you get in the heavier weight, then you definitely want to have those clips on, especially with bars that are a little bit more slidey. So yeah, this bar is a little bit more slidey than one I have at home. So same with these plates. These plates actually tend to slide a little bit off the bar a lot more, so the clips become more necessary, right? So yeah, let's do a set. Okay. say that feels weird. Trying to find that right groove, right? This has been a long time since I've done this. And of course, every decline's a little bit different, but again, it's good to do just to see, you know, what angles of attack you can hit that muscle from. So yeah, I'm going to continue for a few more sets of this, then move on to something else. The only thing I wish these things here were a bit more adjustable, because I find the top one's a little bit too far up for me, and then the bottom one is a little bit too low. So that's why I do like adjustability. So if you ever buy a bench, or at least a rack or something, always make sure there's adjustable clips. In my experience, that's way better. But otherwise, I'm starting to get the hang of this. It's going to take me a few more sessions before I get the groove. But the other thing I like about it is that it stretches my pec in a different way. You know, the pec minor, most likely. And that does help. Like it's almost like the pump and stretch principle, because I'm pumping up the pecs with a flat and then stretching them out a bit with the decline. So there could definitely be some gains that you get from that. That's it for those. Well, that does it for part one of this workout. If you guys want to tune into the next one, make sure you tune into the next video vlog, and I'll show you some calf training that I was doing and some back training at this gym. And yeah, I was experimenting with a new movement, so I'll give you some feedback on that. But yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you need to get a hold of me, just go to naturalgalantbodybuilding.com, and thanks a lot to the Patreon supporters, and take care for now. Mountain.